Hi, this is Steve Rutledge, and this is a brief video about how to create PIES paragraphs. Well, PIES is nothing more than just a simple way to remember what you need to put in an average paragraph, not just for an English paper, but for many academic essays you'll have to write. The P in PIES stands for point, and that's really the first thing you want to do in a paragraph. You want to make a main idea, a claim, a point, and you usually communicate that point in the first or second sentence of the paragraph. We'll put this in red. After making a point, you then need to insert some sort of evidence or example or detail or quote or something that will support the point, that will give us a reason to believe the point. Often, though, it's not enough just to insert a quote or detail or support or example of some sort. You have to go further to offer some kind of explanation of how the insert proves your point. And there are a variety of ways to explain, and I'll show you that in a second. We'll put this in green. Finally, oftentimes you want to summarize the point of the paragraph at the end so that you and the reader are both absolutely clear on what the main point was. Let's see if you can guess why I'm putting this in red before I offer the explanation at the end of the video. Let's see how a point, an insert, an explanation, and a summary sentence work together to make a really good academic paragraph. This semester, some of my students have been studying NFL football, and one of the sources we've looked at was this interview Today Show did with Brett Favre, one of the greatest football players of all times. One quote that's really stuck with me from that interview with Matt Lauer is Brett Favre said, "If he had a son, I would be real leery of him playing football." Wow! Brett Favre, the guy who holds the record for starting the most games in a row, saying if he had a son, he'd be real leery of him playing. Man, that really has stuck with me. Now let's see how I could take something like this quote and turn it into an actual paragraph using PIES. Well, the first thing is I'd have to think of a point I want to make that would use this quote. And this is the point I thought of just off the top of my head. If Brett Favre has doubts about the goodness of playing football, then I think as a society we should question the goodness of football. So there's my point clearly stated. That's a nice clear point, but the difference between, say, talking with your friends about NFL football and writing about it in an academic essay is we expect you to insert some kind of specific evidence, support, an example, something that would support the point you're making. So here's how I might insert the quote I want to use by Brett Favre. Recently, in an interview with Matt Lauer on NBC's Today Show, Favre explained that if he had a son, he would be real leery of him playing football. Let me point out a few things about how I inserted this quote. First, I inserted something called a tagline. I told who said the quote. It's Brett Favre, and by the way, I did not have to write Brett Favre again because I've already stated Brett's full name here, so I can simply use his last name afterwards, as long as it's in the same paragraph. I also say where the quote is taken from. Recently, in an interview with Matt Lauer on NBC's Today Show, that's called a tagline, and for this level of writing, that's good enough. Let's read our paragraph so far. If Brett Favre has doubts about the goodness of playing football, then I think as a society we should question the goodness of football. Recently, in an interview with Matt Lauer on NBC's Today Show, Favre explained if he had a son, he would be real leery of him playing football. Well, it's kind of strange just to leave that insert dangling there. Really, we need to give some sort of explanation. How does this quote help support the point that maybe we need to be questioning the goodness of football as a society? Well, I'm going to give some explanation, and that's the next step in a PIES paragraph. Now, there are lots of ways to offer explanation. One way is to connect to something else you've seen or heard or read. It could be a book from CCS class. It could be a fact that you happen to know to be true. It could be a movie that you've seen. Well, in this paragraph, I clearly remember that Brett Favre holds many of the NFL's greatest quarterback records, so I looked them up to make sure that I was accurate and went ahead and, as an explanation, offered one of the records that Brett Favre holds. So I'm making what's called a text-to-text connection. I'm connecting this text, his quote about him being leery about his son playing football, to this example that he has the most starts by any NFL quarterback in history at 297. Now that's not the end of my explanation, that's actually just going to begin it, but that's a good start, is to connect again to something you've seen, heard, or read, and here's how it reads. Remember that Brett Favre holds many of the NFL's greatest quarterback records, including most starts by an NFL quarterback at 297. It would seem weird to end the paragraph now. I kind of need to explain my explanation a little bit, don't I? So I'm actually going to use an additional explanation strategy. In this case, I'm going to create a simile using the words like or as. So I'm going to insert my simile as some additional explanation right here. And it reads, a guy who would start 297 games straight should know the game really well. So Brett Favre speaking on football would be like Michael Jordan talking about basketball or President Barack Obama talking about politics. They all know the game. So right now this paragraph is looking pretty good, and I'm ready to add my summary sentence. That's going to restate the main point, not using the exact words, but making sure that I clearly communicate to the reader what the main point of what they just read was. And there it is. When an expert like Favre, who knows the game and has the scars to prove it, says he would fear letting his own son play, I think the rest of us should think again about America's game. Now I asked you at the very beginning of this video why I might put this sentence in red, the point sentence at the beginning, and then also put the summary sentence in red at the end. The answer is obvious, isn't it? Both of these should pretty much say the same thing. If your summary idea does not match your point idea, then you probably got off the main point in your PIES paragraph. But isn't it nice if you do include a summary sentence, you can sort of double check to make sure these two add up, that they're both talking about the same thing. So I have now a nice PIES paragraph where I've made a clear point, but I've gone beyond that. I've also inserted a nice quote. Quotes are not the only kind of evidence you can use. You can use personal examples, you can use details. It just depends on the kind of writing you're doing, but since we watched the interview, the quote worked nicely. And then I explained the quote by, in this case, connecting to something I remembered about Brett Favre and his many achievements he has in the NFL. And I also explained by creating a simile. I said Brett Favre talking about football is basically like, and that's how you create a simile. You use the word like or as. It'd be like Michael Jordan talking basketball, or like President Barack Obama talking about politics. And then finally I added on a summary sentence, and together this makes a nice PIES paragraph. Now, you don't actually include the words point, insert, explanation, or summary in your paragraph. I just did that so that you could understand this has PIES all in it. And of course, you don't want to put all these colors. I'm just demonstrating to you that in a good PIES paragraph, you should be able to see each part of PIES. But here's something interesting. I didn't have to write this paragraph this way at all. There are lots of different ways and different directions I could have taken this explanation. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. Boop. And I'm going to offer a different way I could have explained this quote in this PIES paragraph. Another of the many ways you can explain a quote or detail is to define a key word or phrase from the quote. So I might pick out a key word like the word leery, define it, and explain how that definition helps prove my point. It would look something like this. Notice that Favre used the word leery. This word means to be suspicious or very cautious of something. When I think of things I am leery of, I think of guys who hang out in trench coats offering candy to kids at the park. I'm leery of those guys. When I think that Brett Favre might have that same caution towards football, it makes me stop and think. I don't feel like this paragraph is quite over, so I'm actually going to use a fourth technique for explanation, and that is to connect to a personal experience or observation. Here's how I might slide in a personal experience in the explanation part of this paragraph. I think there is a good reason to be leery of football. When I was 9 years old, I was playing pickup football in the park with my friends. One kid, Bill, tackled me so hard the side of my head bashed the ground, and my vision literally became like the fuzz you see on a TV when the cable or satellite goes out. The buzzing only lasted a few seconds, but it scared the heck out of me. I can only imagine what a lifetime of hits like this would do to a brain. It's time now to summarize the main point of the paragraph again, and it might look something like this. Along with Favre, I would also be leery of letting my own son play football. And I think as a society, it's time to take a second look at America's game. And once again, this is in red because it should, not necessarily with the same words, but it should repeat the same point that was offered at the beginning of the paragraph. So there you have it, a PIES paragraph. First, it makes a point. If Brett Favre has doubts about the goodness of playing football, then I think as a society we should question the goodness of football. Next, it inserts some sort of support, in our case from the journals, to support that point. Recently, in an interview with Matt Lauer on NBC's Today Show, Favre explained that if he had a son, he would be real leery of him playing football. Then it offers explanation. Notice that Favre used the word leery. This word means to be suspicious or very cautious of something. When I am thinking of things I am leery of, I think of guys who hang out in trench coats offering candy to kids at the park. I'm leery of those guys. When I think that Brett Favre might have this same caution towards football, it makes me stop and think. I think there is good reason to be leery of football. When I was 9 years old, I was playing pickup football in the park with my friends. One kid, Bill, tackled me so hard, the side of my head bashed the ground, and my vision literally became like the fuzz you see on a TV when the cable or satellite goes out. The buzzing only lasted a few seconds, but it scared the heck out of me. I can only imagine what a lifetime of hits like this would do to a brain. Along with Favre, I would also be leery of letting my own son play football, and I think as a society it's time to take a second look at America's game. Well, this paragraph is a little rough in some ways, but it has all the PIES, and I think it's a good example for you. Remember a few things. The explanation part of the paragraph can often be the hardest, but there's lots of ways to explain. Hey, try to connect to something else you've seen or heard or read, a book, a movie, a newspaper article, a current event, something. Try creating a simile. Use like or as. What is your example like? What is it as? Define a key word. Sometimes just a key word pops out like the word leery did, or a phrase. Finally, you can often connect to a personal experience or observation to help illustrate the point. It just helps make it clear. And that's a PIES paragraph. Make a point in the first sentence or so. Insert some sort of supportive details or quotes or examples. Explain those details, quotes, or examples. And then summarize the main point again, not necessarily in the same words. I think you'll find PIES is very useful for a lot of different type of writing you're going to face, not only in college, but in life. And thank you very much for watching this video. We'll see you in class.